At the Eastern Province Command Base, a high-ranking officer named Chewie stood in a room filled with computers, staring at a screen in confusion and surprise. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Soldiers around him were monitoring and coordinating units on the field. One soldier, standing with one hand behind his back, raised the others to report a SSS-level threat and ordered the elite team's Wolf Teeth and Sharp Blade to immediately move to the specified coordinates. Instantly, everyone in the room shifted their attention to him. A scarred officer named Kin turned around, looking puzzled, and asked his friend what all the commotion was about and if anyone knew the mission details. The same soldier issued further commands, instructing heavy infantry units 5, 6, and 8 to get ready for combat. Another soldier pointed out that the Triple S threat was coming from the Society of Black Magic, a terrorist group from the Land of the Lion. Upon hearing this, Kin's expression darkened. He looked at his friend seriously and explained that with the Society of Black Magic involved, this mission was about to become very dangerous. Chewie, noticing Kin's reaction, looked confused and asked what he meant. Kin closed his eyes, recalling a terrorist attack 3 years prior by the same group in the Southern Military District when he had served on the anti-terrorist team. He asked Chewie if he knew how many troops had been deployed back then. Surprised, Chewie had no idea Kin had been part of that operation. Kin opened his eyes, a tense fear flashing across his face, and began to sweat as he remembered the powerful response they had needed. Over 500 soldiers, including more than 20 Level 7 Masters and 5 Level 8 Great Masters. Even with that level of force, their target had still escaped, leaving the Eastern Military Department humiliated. Chewie walked up to his friend, noting the serious expression on his face, and couldn't shake the feeling that this situation was downright frightening. He was baffled that, despite the intensity of the operation, the target had somehow managed to slip away. Turning to Kin, he asked if it was really true that members of the Society of Black Magic were that powerful. Kin stared straight ahead, his face resolute, confirming that, yes, they were like monsters. In front of them, a table was spread with combat gear. Kin adjusted his tie and inspected the suits, instructing Chewie to get into his gear, as it was time to move out. Chewie's eyes widened in surprise as he looked over the combat suits. Moments later, both men, fully suited up, arrived at the Eastern Military District. Following coordinates shared by the team, they reached the designated location, and Chewie was taken aback by what he saw. Kin, keeping his calm, quietly observed the scene before them. Pagan's body, split in half, lay before them. Both men stood there in shock and disbelief, struggling to accept that the target was already dead. Kin knelt down, resting one hand on his knee, and stretched the other toward the corpse, observing with a grave tone that even in death, Pagan's aura remained formidable. Studying the trail of blood, he deduced that Pagan must have been a Level 8 Great Master. Chewie could only stare at the corpse in shock, struggling to process it all. He knew that Level 8 Great Masters were rare, with perhaps 1,000 worldwide, and the death of any one of them would cause a significant stir. By Pagan's features, he guessed the man was unlikely to be from the Land of the Dragon. With a solemn expression, Kin took a closer look, confirming his suspicions. Pagan had indeed belonged to the Society of Black Magic. His body was cleanly sliced in half, his face untouched by any trace of fear or pain, suggesting he'd likely been killed without even realizing he was under attack. Kin brought his hand closer to the corpse, remarking on the level of force required to make such a precise, flawless cut. Chewie kept his gaze locked on the corpse, his eyes widening in fear as he realized something significant. Startled, he asked Kin to wait and suggested checking Pagan's back. Kin moved closer, placed a hand on Pagan's back, and carefully turned the body. When he saw the tattoo, his eyes filled with alarm. He recognized it instantly. This was the same leader of the Society of Black Magic who had escaped during the attack on the Southern Military District 3 years ago. Chewie came closer, his face a mix of confusion and fear, asking if Qin was saying that someone had actually managed to kill Pagon, the man whom not even 20 masters or 5 grandmasters could defeat. He wondered aloud why anyone would summon them here after taking down the target. Qin continued to examine the body with a calm look, thoughtfully touching his head. He concluded that Lu Sheng had called them to clean up the area. Meanwhile, at the Eastern Military District Command, the marshal sat comfortably with 2 senior officers standing at his side. Reclining in his armchair, he crossed his legs and took out a tablet, smiling at the news that Lu Sheng had taken down Baman with a single strike. The marshal mused that if Lu Sheng wanted to kill him, he'd probably only need 1 hit to succeed. Raising his head, he closed his eyes and sighed with relief, feeling a sense of pride that the army would finally have a true supreme master of martial arts. At that same moment, Lu Sheng reached the entrance of a tunnel, his body radiating an intense golden aura as he scanned the area in silence. Suddenly, a powerful surge of red energy appeared, filling Lu Sheng's eyes with surprise. This intense projection of willpower was even stronger than he had expected. He extended his hand, summoning a fierce flame of gold and red, watching it with astonishment and curiosity. Realizing his past attempts to replicate someone else's fighting will had been pointless, he concluded it was much better to manifest his own. Lu Sheng closed his eyes and concentrated, causing the flames around him to grow even stronger. Using his spiritual power, he created a projection of his own will outside his body. In an instant, this projection took shape, forming a perfect clone that appeared behind him, exuding the same fierce energy. This was no ordinary technique. It was a divine ability of the martial path. Lu Sheng commanded the clone, clenching his fist and gripping his wrist with his other hand. With a piercing gaze, he realized that this manifestation allowed him to perform actions his physical body couldn't, like flying, passing through walls, or even playfully sneaking into restricted areas. It was clear that Lu Sheng's mind was filled with mischievous ideas. He imagined Lion Su on her knees, her eyes filled with fear as he placed his hand on her head. This clone was ideal for dealing with someone like her. He could eliminate targets without revealing his identity, and even if his actions were discovered, the repercussions would be minimal. Lion Su had overstepped her bounds, and despite being the wife of the martial saint, her status wouldn't protect her from the consequences of her actions. Lu Sheng envisioned Lion Su lying on the ground in tears while the martial saint turned his back on her. The price of making an enemy out of Lu Sheng, with all his backing, was far greater than the worth of her title. After confirming that her death wouldn't cause much of a stir, Lu Sheng directed his clone into the tunnel. He activated his blood power, causing his energy to surge and illuminating the far end of the tunnel. Anticipating a confrontation, Lu Sheng felt a rush of excitement as 2 members of the Black Magic Society appeared at the opposite end. He concentrated his power and unleashed a tornado of fire that burst through the ceiling of the tunnel, creating a massive hole. Meanwhile, one of the Black Magic Society members glanced at his watch and announced that the high-speed train carrying their target would arrive any moment now. The woman beside him crossed her arms, looking calm, and agreed that they should take action right away. Just as the man was lost in thought, a surge of golden energy rushed past them, sending him into a state of shock and alertness. He quickly bent down, channeling blue energy to envelop his body. The woman's eyes glowed as she activated her own power, transforming into a dragon demon, while the man turned into a powerful werewolf. Above them, Lu Sheng's projected martial will observed silently. The werewolf man looked up at Lu Sheng's clone in the sky, his expression filled with confusion as he asked his companion Tong Fei if they were looking at a god. Irritated, Tang Fei gritted her teeth and sharply replied that it was more likely a manifestation of the martial saint. The man, slightly surprised, continued to observe Lu Sheng, noting that he didn't quite match the aura of any of the three martial saints and didn't appear as aged as they were rumored to be. Lu Sheng, arms crossed and silent, wore a cool expression as he stretched out a hand toward them, a hint of a smile on his face. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but intimidating. As he extended his hand, a massive golden hand of energy formed and moved toward them. Under its weight, Tang Fei and her companion fell to their knees, prostrating themselves. The man, trembling, raised his head and angrily demanded to know Lu Sheng's identity and the nature of the technique he was using. Lu Sheng tightened his grip, casting them a fierce look and calling them insolent for daring to address him directly. He declared himself the God of the Night, increasing the pressure of his power on them even further. The force of the energy made the man bow, his forehead striking the ground with a loud thud. Lu Sheng sighed, a dark expression crossing his face as he thought that such vermin would never understand, even if he tried to explain. Filled with contempt, he commanded them to hurry up and die, gathering his energy for a final devastating blow. Sensing their impending doom, the man lifted his head, determination igniting in his eyes as he prepared to dodge the lethal strike. Just as Lu Sheng unleashed his attack, Tong Fei and her companion leaped backward, escaping the area just in time. Lu Sheng spread his arms wide, summoning a powerful golden ring that materialized behind him, his eyes blazing with intensity as he taunted them, calling them disposable vermin. He resolved to summon an immortal to annihilate them right then and there. The man clenched his fists in a mix of rage and disbelief, while Tang Fei grew increasingly anxious. She stared at Lu Sheng, muttering to herself that the title God of Night was something she had heard before, a divine figure from the ancient legends of long ago. Her companion turned to her in astonishment. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng, arms crossed, continued to watch them in silence, his aura casting a heavy shadow over them as they finally began to realize they might be facing a figure of myth. Asterisk. This is the end of the video. If you want to see the next part, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.